Buy a subscription to The Athletic this December and gift one absolutely free. See the link in the description for more information.
Newcastle United are currently 13th in the Premier League table. They had an unusually good transfer window in the summer, bringing in experienced Premier League professionals like Callum Wilson, Ryan Fraser, and also promising young left-back Jamal Lewis. So everything looks pretty well set for Steve Bruce's team. But if you peer under the hood, you can see that there are some troubling indications in the numbers. If you have a look at XG differential, which is expected goals for minus expected goals against, Newcastle are at minus 2.7. That means that their attack is underperforming in relation to their defence. So of the teams below Newcastle in the table that have a better XG differential, we would expect Arsenal to move further up, partly on the basis that their squad has a greater degree of quality. Brighton, arguably the most unlucky team in the Premier League this season, the numbers also indicate that they should be higher in the table. So what this means for Newcastle is that they are likely to be overtaken by at least a couple of teams. And what they need to do is address the deficiencies in their attack. So that's what we're going to have a look at today. Newcastle United started the season brightly with a 2-0 win against West Ham, and they used this setup here. Now, we're going to come back to the tactics, but before we do that, it's worth mentioning a couple of other numbers. Newcastle United are currently bottom of the Premier League for average possession at 39.1%. They're also lowest for progressive passes per 90. That's passes that move the ball forwards 10 yards towards the opponent's goal but are not in the defensive 40% of the pitch. They're only making 19.1 of those per game. And they're also bottom for shots per 90 and shots on target per 90. The latter of those two, they're joint with Sheffield United. So while Newcastle United are looking okay in the table, as we can see, they have a very, very clear attacking deficiency. Now, Steve Bruce sought to address this in the early game of the season by playing two up top. So here we can see Andy Carroll and new signing Callum Wilson. It is just worth mentioning that Callum Wilson has really done exceptionally well this season. He's got 7 goals, 3 of those are penalties. His 4 non-penalty goals have come from an XG of 3.9 or a non-penalty XG of 3.9. So he's performing very, very well. And as we'll see, Newcastle's problems in attack haven't really stopped him performing, but there's definitely ways of making Callum Wilson better and more productive. One of the ways that Bruce sought to do this, as I said, is pairing him with a second striker. Now, in this instance, it's Andy Carroll. Andy Carroll actually leads Newcastle United currently for shots per 90 with 2.95, but he hasn't registered a single shot on target. So one of the things that Newcastle will need to do is find a more productive way of supporting Callum Wilson, but we'll talk about that a little later on. Now, the balance of this team here that started the season is actually quite nice. So you've got Sam Maximan here on the right-hand side. He's able to make runs in field. He's a good carrier of the ball, good dribbler. Jeff Hendrick here, who's another of their summer transfers, is able to tuck inside and add a little bit of bulk in midfield. He's also quite a good crosser of the ball. Hayden here is the ball winner, and John Joe Shelby is actually a really underrated deep progressor of the ball. Very, very good at vertical passes. Lewis adds some go forwards here on the left, which is one of the reasons that Hendrick can tuck inside. Manquillo is a little less aggressive on the right-hand side and kind of tucks in to make a third centre-back. So everything about this looks quite nice and balanced, and we've seen teams using 4-4-2 in the Premier League to reasonably good effect, noticeably Crystal Palace. Unfortunately, what happens for Newcastle United is that even when they have a relatively attacking formation like this, a couple of bad results sees them revert to this formation here. Now, this is a much, much more conservative 5 at the back. And Steve Bruce seems to have an issue whereby he seeks to be progressive and attacking. So around Project Restart, for example, Newcastle United were using the 4-2-3-1 and relatively effectively. But as soon as a couple of results go against them, Bruce reverts to a 5 at the back. He privileges defensive security over everything else. And as we've said, football is a low-scoring game, so if you can prevent your opponent from scoring, even if you don't score yourself, you're likely to maybe get a point or nick a goal. And Newcastle are effective at winning penalties and free kicks. So there is a logic here. Unfortunately, what it does is it really, really restricts Newcastle's attacking abilities. So here we can see the 5-4-1 shape. This was the lineup that was used against Chelsea, for example. So Joelinton is up here on his own. Sometimes this would be Callum Wilson. Saint-Maximin and Murphy on the right-hand side are supposed to get forwards and to provide attacking support. Saint-Maximin does do that, and he carries the ball quite well into this right half space, but Murphy does also act almost as a kind of second right back. Lewis is restricted, and then they try to kind of stuff up the middle with Hayden here, and in this instance, Sean Longstaff, who's really just a kind of regulation ball winner rather than a particularly progressive midfielder. You've got nobody here in the central midfield area who's particularly great at passing the ball. Murphy is reasonable at carrying it forwards, but effectively Newcastle are creating two units where they've got pretty much 8 players behind the ball, and then they're relying on Saint-Maximin and, in this instance, Joelinton or possibly Callum Wilson to come really quite deep because of their inability to progress, and then carry the ball forwards effectively themselves and try and generate some sort of opportunity. Now, there are 2 problems with this. Firstly, if you're really only pushing forward with 2, even 3 players, it's a lot easier for the opposition to mark. Chelsea in this game were playing a back 3, and so they were quite able to stop many of those attacks. The other issue is that even if you do get a shot off on target, and Joelinton and Saint-Maximin are both in Newcastle's top 5 for generating shots and shots on target, even if you force a save, you've only got another player up there with you who's perhaps looking to get on a rebound. It makes it much harder to recycle possession. Even if Lewis pushes up here and Murphy pushes up here, you've still got a very, very defensive central midfield. You know, they're not the sort of players that are progressively moving up the pitch, that are looking to hoover up rebounds and strike the ball. And there's certainly nobody who's then, you know, maybe taking the ball and spreading the play out, looking for those gaps out to the sides where crosses can come in. So what do Newcastle need to do to address this? So we've seen that Steve Bruce reverts to a back 5 almost as a kind of comfort blanket when, you know, defensive issues are causing Newcastle to lose games. He privileges an attempt at defensive solidity over attacking instinct. The problem with that, obviously, is that if you add a player to the defence, you're taking away a player from further up the pitch. This is kind of slightly against Steve Bruce's instincts, you know, as we've seen around Project Restart with the 4-2-3-1 or the 4-4-2 at the beginning of the season. He does want to play a back 4, and he does recognise, I think, that there is, a need for more attacking support up the pitch. But there is this kind of retrenchment to being more defensive when things don't go Newcastle's way. If Newcastle's biggest problem is getting the ball forwards and getting shots off, it makes sense to take a player away from the defence and to have more players further up the pitch. So let's get rid of a central defender, go to a back 4. I think ideally we'd have Ryan Fraser here on the right-hand side, Saint-Maximin on the left, and let's put Joelinton in as a 10 in order to support Wilson, and we'll also put Shelvey in here as a central midfielder. So what this lineup does is it helps Newcastle be more productive in an attacking way. Crucially here, Joelinton. Now, Joelinton is not a single striker on his own. He wasn't used that way at Hoffenheim, and when he's been most successful, it's been when he's been paired with another striker. He's also very good at holding up the ball, taking it under pressure, and linking play. So, for example, if the fullback is looking to pass the ball forwards here, Joelinton is able to hold it up, take it under pressure, and then feed the ball through to Wilson or lay it out wide to one of these wide players who can get forwards and then cross it in. Joelinton shouldn't be expected to work as a lone target man. And of course now, because he has Callum Wilson in his squad, Steve Bruce doesn't need to use him that way. Saint-Maximin on form probably gets into this side. He adds something that is pretty rare in the Premier League currently, that sort of dash of the unexpected. He's a really good dribbler and a really good ball carrier. And that's balanced out on the other side by Fraser, who's much more of a crossing player. He is going to take players on, but largely to kind of get that yard of space to be able to cross the ball in. This sort of front four unit can be quite free-floating. But the crucial point here is that Wilson has support, and Newcastle can get quite a lot of players forwards without necessarily compromising their defensive structure. Part of the reason is that Hayden here is actually really good as a ball winner. Shelvey is there as a recycling option. And if Lewis pushes up, he can either tuck inside and make a kind of midfield three because Manquillo is good at tucking inside on the right hand, or he can even push all the way up and make that sort of five shape that we're quite used to seeing really good attacking teams use. Now, Newcastle, if they play this sort of way, almost by default, they are going to get more passes into the final third, they're going to get more progressive passes, and crucially, they're going to get more shots on target. So there is a Newcastle United team here that we've shown that looks exciting and progressive, has goal scorers like Wilson, has players that can hold the ball up like Joelinton, dribblers like Saint-Maximin, you've got players on the bench like Almiron who can come on and change things around. Steve Bruce knows all of this. You know, this is not something that he won't have wrestled with. The issue is that with a back five comes greater defensive security. With a back five comes a mitigation of individual defensive errors, and perhaps in the pressure of the Premier League and also with all of Newcastle's injuries, and we really do need to stress that they have suffered with a lot of injury problems, there's kind of a hedging of bets going on here, that it's better to try and be defensively secure than to play a more progressive and exciting style of football. The problem that Newcastle United have is that the underlying numbers don't look great for them. And one of the easiest ways to address this deficiency is to try and generate more shots. Now, Newcastle United, injuries permitting, can put out a team that will do exactly that. So the back five is the current favoured option, but it'll be interesting to see if the numbers do bear out and Arsenal and Brighton start to move up the table, whether Steve Bruce takes the other available option to him, which makes for a more attacking, possibly more interesting Newcastle United.
If you're looking for holiday gifts this winter, we're pleased to be able to offer a buy one, gift one deal on subscriptions to The Athletic. It's world-class sports journalism with a roster of writers including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence, Daniel Taylor and Ollie Kay. There's dedicated journalists for each Premier League team, bringing you all the latest news and inside information, not to mention hundreds of journalists doing the very same thing for 10 other sports. So, to buy one and gift one this December, see the link in the description, and thanks for watching today's video.